This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi everyone, it's Alexa Linton here, and you're on the Whole Horse Podcast. And today on the podcast, I have Allie Goin here again to continue our conversation about the work that I'm doing, and for Allie to ask me some questions. And thanks for being here, Allie.
My pleasure, Alexa.
It's always so nice to chat, and I I'm really loving the work that we're doing together as well right now, and we can get more into that in a little bit in the podcast. But I think it sort of informs some of what we're going to chat about
Absolutely.
today. So yeah, I'm interested to see where this conversation goes for us.
Well, I was just thinking that maybe we should start because I remember last time you did talk a lot about Diva and your story of meeting Diva and the role that she's played in your life and your work. And now I know you have another mare, Raven, and I really don't know anything about her story, how you found her, how she found you, kind of what you've been doing with her. So maybe that would be a good place to start and just weave that into
Yeah,
your overall approach.
yeah, I would love to chat about her. So Raven is a 6-year-old. Her birthday is April 18th. And she's a purebred Canadian mare. And a lot of people are like, there is a Canadian horse. And yes, there is a Canadian horse. And she's I've met many Canadians over the years. And interestingly enough, um, so Raven's aunt is actually Libby, who is Jerry Ramsey, one of my guests from a little while back, her mare. And I've been working with Libby for about 7 years. So, and what's really funny is Libby is not only Raven's aunt, but she's also Raven's grandmother. So Raven should cover her
Huh.
ears at the moment. She is inbred. Raven is inbred. Her
Okay.
father, her father Taboo, interestingly enough, was his name, managed to get into the pasture with her mom Tosca.
Oh,
And
really?
do some taboo
That's
things.
interesting.
Yes. So so that's one piece of Raven's story, which I don't always talk to her about. And she's been a really interesting case study for me in a way. I don't like to call a horse that, but like in terms of just what I've learned from her and her body. So when I first met Raven, she was a client of mine, and I was called out because she was experiencing some different physical symptoms, particularly to do with her front end. And thankfully, I just started my osteopathy training and found her to have a, a very compacted, rigid sternum, and was actually quite blown away. I'd never felt anything like it. It literally, like, you'd watch her walk and it would stick out of her chest like an inch and a half, 2 inches,
Oh, wow.
like the mast of a ship. That's not supposed to happen. Generally, with a sternum, you like it to be tucked away and not protruding from their chest.
Yeah.
So what went on to develop was
about a year and a half ago, she was diagnosed with early onset arthritis in her left front coffin joint and navicular. And so at that point, she was actually put on a daily dose of Previcox medication for the pain
Hmm.
at 4.5 years old.
Oh
So,
boy.
yeah. And so when I went out to work with her, I did a lot of work, but her coat wasn't great. Her you could just see like this sort of lower vitality in her,
Hmm.
and her poops were really runny, like sort of a leaky gut type of thing going on. And yeah, it was I did as much as I could for her at that time. But it was hard to do enough in just one session and then maybe see her again in a week or two. And yeah, there was just lots going on. So fast forward to about 8 months ago, and I'd become quite good friends with her human, and um, her human was experiencing some health challenges and was really not able to keep Raven. Was had no longer had her driver's license, and so I, yeah, I sort of, I guess for better or for worse, I volunteered myself. I said, you know,
Wow.
I'm sure I can like help make this work, and let's figure this out. I just really didn't want to see her going into a space where she would be overworked or she was
Yeah.
just sound with daily Previcox, and that was only for a short time, and at the trot usually not even, especially ridden. So,
Wow.
so I just, went, there's something about this mare. She's super, super playful and interested and um, sort of that joker energy a little bit, but quite balanced as well and really solid. So I, worked with a couple of friends around that to find a space for her for that time, and then on July 1st, I brought her home to the farm. Um, and she's a really quite an amazing horse. She's 6, but you can literally put a bareback pad on her and jump on, and she does not care. Like she's very very
Wow.
relaxed about all sorts of things, and she, unlike Diva, is not really particularly uh, put out by having other humans work with her or ride her. She quite enjoys it. She likes having lots of different humans in her life working with her. And so I always joke that Raven has many moms. So her previous human is still very much a part of her life, and she has other moms in her life as well that assist with her
Oh,
care and
nice.
yeah, are connected to her in various ways. So it's really cool to see. So once she came home to me here, and it was just her and Diva, it was this really really interesting experience. So I listened to Emily Keeson's podcast. Obviously, I listened to it. I chatted with Emily Keeson about
Hmm.
the idea of these pair bonds, and that horses in a even a large herd will seek out pair bonds that are really compatible for them and meet their needs. And I just hadn't really seen that with Diva until Raven, and
Hmm.
they just are amazing together and so easy
Wow.
together and so happy together. And
That's great.
yeah, which is amazing. It's amazing. I just love it. So it's been a real blessing to see the relaxation in Diva and the contentment with her. And also in Raven, they both have settled just so beautifully around this sense of, they groom each other a bunch of times a day. They both like doing the same things, and so they have their little adventures, and they're having a very good time. So yeah, so that's kind of where we're at now. And I mean, there's lots to this story with Raven because of her physical piece with the arthritis
Mhm.
and the sternum and the thorax. She's been an incredible teacher for me in terms of joint health and these little tiny joints that are having a huge impact on horses. And then also tracking back, okay, what's it about? Like, where did, it's not like she's been ridden a ton. This mare has been, she's been trained using straightness training principles and academic art of riding principles. She's, all the right things have been done for her, on a lot of levels. And um, so, okay, what happened essentially um, is the question that always goes through my mind with her.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I was telling you before the podcast, like this mare, when she figured out, so I have this ritual every night before I go to bed. I use my applied kinesiology and I muscle check if there is a priority for today. So if there's anything that I need to know, if there's anything I need to know about my animals or like anything, it can come up then
Mhm.
and I'll, sleuth it out and see what it is. So Raven um figured this out really early on into our time together. And initially, she wasn't that interested in taking advantage of that. But now she pretty much comes in every night and says, I've got this little thing I need you to do. And I work with body talk usually. That's usually her modality of choice. And I do, whatever it is for her. And I wish it's usually when I've turned off the light and, it's like 10 p.m. and, I'm off to bed. So I don't write it down. But it'd be really interesting to look at the scope of that and the trajectory of that and where she wants to go. And I do remember, even last night was so interesting because she's starting to veer down this path of being like, I think I might want to do like equine facilitated wellness work. And I was like,
Mm.
really? Um, so she's talking about connecting with different people and, being in a healing role that way. And that's the very first time that's kind of come up for her, shifted for her. So, yeah, so it was really interesting to see what is needed and how it's opened up a lot of things along the way. Initially it was we did a lot of ancestral trauma work. The Canadian line has a lot of trauma in it. And even when they were exported, her mother was exported from Ontario and Libby. After they arrived, there was stuff that went on there as well. So Raven's been sort of brought up into that. And her mother had an injury before she was born as well. So there's a lot of stuff there that makes me really curious about what happened for Raven. And yeah, it's been really fun to have her being more verbal about, verbal as verbal as she can be um, about what's going on. Hmm. Yeah.
So this opens up a really interesting and big area of discussion. But in terms of your philosophy, this is a whole horse podcast, and we're going to talk about the whole horse apprenticeship program that you're doing that's
Hmm.
coming up. But this whole piece about whole piece of the whole horse,
Yeah.
you have this philosophy, and my understanding is you've got it kind of into 4 categories.
Hmm.
And let me see if I can pull them from memory: energetic, physical,
Hmm.
emotional. Is it spiritual? Is the
Yeah.
4th one spiritual?
Yeah. Hmm.
I got it. Yeah.
You got it.
So, I think, yeah, I mean, just to lay that out, because I think for people in the horse world, we're getting more accustomed to addressing the physical. I think most horse people
Yes.
know that they have to
Totally.
take care of their horse's physical needs, and they're getting more sophisticated about that. And then now there's more research coming out, particularly the stuff related to learning science and nervous system
Yep.
science about emotions. So people now are getting, oh, horses also have emotions. um, but I think the
Yeah.
other two, the energetic and the spiritual, are definitely still, we're still in the minority maybe of people who are looking at those two. And I'm sure your listeners are curious or are already working in these areas, but maybe we should just use that as a little segue to talk about, what are these two, and how
Yeah.
does this
Yeah.
work that you're doing with Raven connect to that?
Yeah. But it's so interesting because I think, even as I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's going to be people that think I am cray cray, look at her talking
Yeah,
to her
yeah, there
horse
might.
and connecting at a distance.
Yeah,
And, and
yeah,
it's so funny because it's just become so normal for me. Like, I don't even really think about
right,
it, of like, that's
yeah.
not something that people do all the time. My sense
Right,
is that a lot of us do, and we don't realize it, first of all. Like, we might
yeah,
have
yeah,
intuitive hits about different things. Like the other day, Diva was like telepathically influencing me because she really wanted to go in her favorite field. I hadn't been letting them out there in a while. And so in my dreams, like, I'm seeing this field and things. And I was like, that's weird. And then when I came out in the morning, she went up into the hayfield where they've been going, came back down maybe 3 minutes later and stared at me and just was so like, come on now, like, you got this, you can get this. And, I gave her a little hay. She was still, and I'm going, is there something wrong with you? Like, do I need to, what do I need to
yeah,
do here? Gave her a little hey. Raven came down going, what's wrong? What's going on? And Diva just kept like, and every time I'd go down towards the other gate, towards the other field, she'd follow me, so I'm like, finally, the message got across, and I'm like, oh. And as I walked down there, she was like trotting behind me, like, yes, you've got it. Yes, yes, yes. So I think that most people with their horses have probably gotten messages like that they don't necessarily
yeah,
understand as energetic, kind of connections with their
yeah,
horse, where their
yeah.
horse is like,
Hmm.
give me the treats, what you want to get, like,
Right.
or you get a
Yeah,
sense of like, I need to change the supplements. It's not quite working, or something's not working here. Or maybe you get a gut feeling that the feet aren't as balanced as they could be, or whatever, right? Like, and you
hmm,
don't necessarily know where it comes from, but there's information there. And very often we might go, oh, like, that was just whatever, like, or we write it off as something else. But to me, that's a part of the energetic connection. Now with horses, like, we've heard Elise's and Josh's podcast about the heart and like this heart energy and how
hmm,
it's huge in horses. um, this is again a part of the energetic. And one of the other pieces that I love to weave into my work is of course like looking at the traditional Chinese medicine aspect of like, how are the
hmm,
meridians working here, and like, where are we on the Chinese clock? And that's another energetic
hmm,
piece. Or the chakra system, what's going on within these different 7 energy centers that might be related to a health concern, or a behavior or a way of being in the world, right? Like, oftentimes when I
hmm,
see an
hmm,
insecure or anxious horse, like, they have tons of tension in their sacrum, in their coccyx, and they don't want to lift their tail. There's a lot of tension in and around like the hamstrings and that sort of area in the root chakra. Survival is a piece for them,
hmm.
and they don't feel totally safe and comfortable, right? So you'll see those horses
Right.
that are almost scooted under, a little bit, and you'll see that in dogs too, right? That's also energetic, that root chakra of feeling safe and secure in your world, and settled, in your basic needs being met. Yes. So
Hmm.
so that's what I think of as the energetic piece. And also with the body talk that I do, lying in bed connecting to my horse, that's a part of the energy piece. Like, it's understanding, and I've been doing distance work for a really long time, and so it's really normal for me. But for a lot of people, it really, you know, is really hard to grasp. Like, how could you possibly, be sitting there and connecting with a horse wherever, right? Um, and I get it. That's really tough, for most humans to wrap their minds around. And it was for me as well. It was for me as well. And for years, like, it really was hard for me to feel like I was being as effective. It was only through the feedback of the humans and the animals that I was working with
Mhm.
that it was
Mhm.
like, oh, okay, this stuff is really working, and things are shifting, and like you and Tenzin and your family are kind of,
Yeah.
that sort of sense of,
Yeah.
yeah, like this is doing things, like there's information being relayed that is accurate, and
Yes.
how crazy is that, right? And yeah, and it's basically like, learning to read it's always there. It's kind of like learning to read it, right? Like a book in a different language, okay, if I learn that language, I can actually like read that book and figure out what's there, right? And so, yeah, it can look a bit like magic, but it's really just another way of communicating, and translating information, that's just a bit more subtle, but pretty darn effective if we use it that way. Yeah, so that energy piece is super super cool. I just love working that way. I mean, one of the things that I've been doing lately, and it might be kind of fun to talk about this, just in case there's anybody out there that thinks that this would be a fit for them, is like, I have people that just message me and go, "Can you just do a session on my horse? This is what's going on."
Mhm.
Or if there's an emergency or something like that. And they
Yep.
keep me kind of in the back of their mind for those moments. And one particular case that I've been working with is a beautiful horse, um, that had initially a cranial injury, um, and we started working from there, and it he literally did this full overhaul of his whole system, which was a little bit, as we worked through it, there was definitely some nail biter moments of, getting a text like, "This is now going on. What's happening here?" And you know, but as it
Wow.
opened up, and as the care was there, and this is working with me, but yes, like also other team members, veterinarians, farriers, like, everybody working in his corner. But he's actually moving far better than he ever did before his injury to his cranium, because of being able to kind of unpack all these pieces that he'd been carrying even before all that. It's kind of like it opened up Pandora's box a little bit and let us in
Sure.
to some deeper like trauma work and emotional clearing and all sorts of things that we probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise. But it was a part of his healing process. So that was been really, really cool to watch his progress and actually see like video of him moving, and how things are changing, and being able to work with him on that level has been very cool. And I've never touched him. I've actually never met him, ever. So
Yeah,
being
that's the
able to do
same
that
same with
physical,
me and my horses.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And my horse and my dogs.
The
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So it's just really cool what the potential is there, and I love sharing that and teaching that to others as well, how to work with that more,
Yeah.
because there's lots that we can do just as horse people. Don't have to be a
So
professional at this or
let's
anything.
talk about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean that was going to be my next question for you, because that, when you're talking about this is a language that you can learn, and it's a book and you can read it, you know, it- obviously, and I think
Mhm.
we may have touched on this in our other conversation, but I know that you believe that these are learned skills, or they're
Yep.
learnable skills, and that you felt, you learned them, and so I know you, with the upcoming Whole Horse Apprenticeship, you include some of these pieces, like your applied kinesiology courses included in there. So obviously, you feel like you can teach some of these skills to regular horse people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons that I love, like, I have a course coming up in October called Energy and Equus. And it's all about like teaching. It's like practical energy work for horse people, horse lovers.
Oh, cool. I don't know about that
Yeah,
one.
I know, at the farm.
Awesome.
So yeah, if anybody's in BC and wants to come, October 3rd, 4th, and yeah, these sorts of things, though, it can be a stretch for our mind for sure. I think that's the biggest piece. I know when I was learning, that was the biggest piece of like feeling doubtful, thinking that I was, out to lunch with all this stuff. But there are lots of pieces to this puzzle that you can actually learn really easily. So, I'll often teach, and especially in apprenticeship, that's kind of my apprenticeship's my baby. Like it is a total. It's all the stuff that I love, like in one 6-month piece. So it's like super collaborative, super in depth in certain ways. And I try to really like give a ton of like build skill sets essentially. Cause in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, having those skill sets, then you can start to draw on that stuff when you're in like different scenarios. You're like, what do I do here? Oh, right.
Yeah.
Like my horse is super anxious. I can use the cortices. I can use the switching technique. I can use this flower essence or that herb or this particular bodywork technique or, work with the bladder meridian or a ting point or like, you know what I mean? That you're not like, oh, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. There's like right away things are coming to mind. Oh yeah, I remember. There's all this cool stuff that I can actually work with around this, or around anything. So like even with the raven stuff, like I know that a lot of people are dealing with horses with different things going on in their legs, feet, joints, bodies in general. I don't meet many horses that are like, I'm perfect, especially because we ride them and
Yeah.
there's stuff going on. I mean, even Tenzin's going through his own little,
He is.
healing
That's true.
crisis process, awakening
Yeah.
moment at present, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's all these questions. Okay, what do I do? What's the next step forward? Like, what does it look to have? What does it look like to have a barefoot horse?
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that I should
Mm-hmm.
look for to make sure I have a great trimmer? Or, how do I know
Mm-hmm.
if my horse's teeth aren't really balanced in their mouth? Or, all these pieces, right? And so,
Right.
yes, there is a language to the energy. There is a language in terms of what the amount of information we're able to pick up. And what I love about the energy work, I mean, there's lots of that I love about the energy work, but it allows us often to pick things up before they become a physical issue.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there is great benefit to that in my mind. So before they become a physical manifestation, we can go, oh, I'm just sensing that there's like, I need to do a supplement change or I need to add this in. Or that, this particular trail might not be the best one to ride down today. Or that, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
this sort of stuff starts to pop up. Like we've all had that feeling, or maybe not all of us, but I know I've had that feeling of riding my horse and being like, you need to get off right now. And then there was that one
Oh
time that
yeah.
I
Absolutely.
didn't listen, right? And
Right.
I
Yeah.
I found
Yeah.
myself like 2 seconds later with my back like in a mud puddle, like on my back in a mud puddle with like not even sure where my black horse was in the realm of things. Like,
Right. Right.
and I was totally fine and but it was that moment of like, you need to listen to that thing. It keeps us safe, right? That inner voice, that wisdom, whatever you want to, inner knowing, whatever you want to call it. But that's a part of the learning, is cultivating that relationship with our own inner wisdom, with our own trust in ourselves, trust in our decisions, because we are the most connected to our horses, right? Generally. And so then
Right.
through that inner knowing, we get feedback information that we can then advocate for our horses in a better way. And that's really cool. Like that's right up my alley right there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, I'm excited to participate in the apprenticeship program this year. I looked at it last year and then it ended up not being exactly the right time, and now I'm super excited to join you because I feel like that piece, the having that confidence in yourself of knowing that you can trust these sources of information and that there are other people out there that you can consult with to make some of
Hmm.
these choices is just so helpful because I think a lot of us, I mean, it's still that when you look at it globally, say looking at everyone you've had on your podcast, it seems like, wow, there's just this growing movement of people that are looking at horses differently. And I think that's absolutely true. But then on the individual level, there's still so many of us that are isolated because we're still a very small minority,
Yeah.
So the numbers are still like, we're not all as lucky as you guys on Vancouver Island to have this really hip community of horse people all supporting each other. I'm in the Midwest. So, um, I
Yes.
think that connecting and building the confidence so that you can have those skills, like you were saying, to advocate for your horse and to feel comfortable doing that, particularly if you're going against the grain,
Yeah.
which a lot of these things are. And I think the other cool thing, or the other thing I was going to say, thinking about people who might be new to your work or are considering doing the apprenticeship but are not sure, is just that I think that you have a real open attitude. It's not kind of like dogmatic. You have to believe these things or you're not in the club. It's really like there's such a broad spectrum of, people that you collaborate with. And I think people could really get a lot out of the program, even if they're still not quite sure about one or two pieces, or maybe I don't want to try applied kinesiology, but I do really want to learn about all the other parts. You can
Yeah.
always plant a seed and learn about something and not follow up on it for a while. Maybe it'll
Oh
speak to
my
you five
gosh.
years from now. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had people say that. They're like, I just could not get behind the spiritual part of this. Like,
Yeah.
it just pushed me a little too far. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
totally get that. Like, it's, and I work in that program to not take it too woo woo. Like, and you'll see me, like, I try to find that neutral ground where it's, like you said, I'm not dogmatic. Like, you can be doing, you know, like a lot of different things with your horses. Like, what I want to
Yeah.
create is a situation where, yeah, like maybe it's like, I want to look at this a little differently, or I have this horse that's come into my life and they're different from all the rest and I don't know how to work with them. There's often, like, I know for myself, like there was that big, huge gap between like the traditional world and what was on the other side, like being with my horses
Yeah.
differently. And I didn't know how to get across. I needed a
Mhm.
bridge. And I think in some ways, I sourced out people that could help me find that bridge, right? And like you
Yeah.
say, I'm very lucky on Vancouver Island. Like, I live 15 minutes down the road from Heather Nelson, and like a lot of my guests even come from this area or close by. Like, I'm very, very lucky to be in this environment. And yeah, I think that when we can take advantage of the online space, which I've tried
Yeah.
to do with this particular program, and have a really vibrant community where, us rebels, as I like to call, horse people that are doing things differently, and someday we
Yeah.
won't be that. Like, someday it will be like, oh yeah, right. But right now, yeah, like, it's not, we are a minority, and that's okay. And there are more people kind of dipping their toe. Like, you might be one of those listening where you're like, oh, thinking about it, but it's all a little bit weird, like, and that's okay
Right.
too. Like,
Right. Yeah.
it really is a very different way of thinking about horses, because we give them, we come to an understanding that yes, they have emotions, yes, they have consciousness, yes, they have a spiritual presence, like,
Hmm.
and that for me even was very mind-blowing until, Diva came into my life and was like, "Oh, hey, just so you know, I am, most definitely your equal, and we're going to do this walk together as spiritual beings, and that's what this is about." And at the time, that was a very foreign concept to me. That I mean, I had been raised with no religion or anything. Like, spirituality was not a
Yeah.
thing that I had bandwidth for even. But something in me, deep within me, just knew. Like, when I met Diva, it there was just this knowing, this is my partner. I need to be with her. And it was rough, like we've talked about, and still
Yeah.
that connection stayed present and strong. And I think that's what I mean about the spiritual piece. And I know, I've worked with people that are like, how do I know? How do I know when that next horse, that partner? And I'm like, there's just something there, and it's like almost inexplicable,
Yeah.
the feeling around it, you know? Um, yeah, yeah. And it's cool because I feel that I've never felt that with any other horse, um, until Raven. So that's kind of, one reason as well why she's so special to me. Was Yeah, and for any of you out there that haven't seen a picture, and I'll post one with this podcast, they are like basically twinsies. They're the exact same
Right. Yeah.
color. They fit all the exact same tack. Like, I don't even need to
Oh,
change
that's nice.
the buckle on my
Convenient.
headstall. Nothing. They are. I can barely tell them apart some days. I know that Raven has a longer mane and forelock, so that helps me. But yeah, it's really, really interesting to see these two coming together. And yeah, I'm fascinated to understand more. I mean, I think that's what I bring to all of this work, is just a real curiosity of, like,
Yeah.
trying to understand, yeah, more and more and more about the depth of what this means to be with horses and to be in life in general, and to do, this earth walk and all of that, right? Yeah.
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 And I think that's the interesting thing about people maybe balking at the spiritual side of horses, because actually when you really get into it and you talk to most horse people know that there's this power or energy about horses, and that it's an intangible thing, and it's the thing that draws us to them. Everybody knows that. Like, there's all these jokes about, how addicted we are to horses, or how once you're a horse lover, there's no going back. And, people even who don't have a horse or aren't serious about horses will say that, that are
Yep.
affected by the spiritual power of horses. So I think everybody actually has experienced that. And even people who are like your most traditional riders and
Yeah.
trainers will talk about certain partnerships, or, how they
Yep.
know their horse so well, so I think it's maybe the block
Yep.
is more mental, and it's more about like the words and how people categorize
Totally.
things, because the
Totally.
experience is pretty common for all of us, I think.
Yeah, it's the sense of awe when you see horses running in a field.
Yeah.
If you're a horse
Yeah.
person, that that even the sound of their hooves on the ground
Right.
will
Yeah.
enliven you in some way, right? It's the feeling
Right.
of, like, when a horse, like, breathes their nose into your nose, you know? So, like, yes, we can say spiritual or whatever, but, like, there's this essence there that we just
Yeah.
understand, right? And it's beautiful. Like, it's changed so many lives just to be in that presence. And
Hmm.
so often we don't learn how to relate to it, to the presence, right? And that's kind of
Right. Right.
where we're sitting right now in the horse world, is like, okay, I get that there's this presence and this feeling that I have, particularly maybe with one horse. Like, I have this deep, deep bond and connection. and I don't really know how to relate to that in a good, healthy way, in a way
Mm-hmm.
that serves
Mm-hmm.
both of us, that actually is loving, that brings strength to both parties or all parties. That's the next step, and that requires like some letting go. That requires unpacking of, okay, what have I believed about horses? What did I think was true? How have I interacted with them? What were the beliefs, founding those interactions? If
Yeah.
I have a belief founding my interactions from the time I was 6, where my instructor, explicitly shared with me that these are animals, they don't have feelings, they can't feel when I pull their mane out, they don't know, they don't feel pain when I hit them, all those things, that they're lesser than me, like those things get ingrained in us, and they inform how we interact, how we train, how we are experiencing our horses, right? If we've been
Mm-hmm.
told, like I was, that horses are a hierarchical being, that we need to show up and show them who's boss, that, anytime we give an inch, they'll take a mile, that's going to inform our experience with them and our training and our actions towards them and our feelings towards them. So this is the unpacking. I mean, I'm just like, I'm I re, I'm launching this new online course like within the apprenticeship, and it was really so inspired by this piece of going, oh my God, we need to rewrite the story, because most of us have come through with all of this programming and conditioning, saying all this stuff that like may not actually be true, that is absolutely uh impacting our relationships at this moment, and we need to
Yeah.
start repairing that and changing that. And I called it redefining equine, because I was like, okay, let's look at this, like what is here, what has been here, and where do we want to go? Because generally those old beliefs and foundations that came from being taught certain things, they're not going to take us to like where we want to go. Which, if where we want to go is connection, and we believe that our horse is constantly wanting to take advantage of us and disrespect us, and that they're lesser
Right.
than us, and that they don't have
Yeah.
consciousness or
Yeah.
feelings, connection is going to be very challenging, or it will be a connection to a very, very certain level, and then that will be the end of it, right? And so that's
Right.
why I created that course, and why it's such a big part of my teaching and my podcast and my everything. Because when I look at horses and the horse industry and kind of what is needed, I feel like that's a part of it, to really reflect on where we've been and where we want to go, and without judgment. I think this is what I try to bring to every piece of it, because I think,
Yeah.
I talked about in the last chat we had, Allie, about, how self-judgmental and self-critical I can be, and you don't always see that in my online space and everything. I talk about it a little bit, but it's big for me. It's really huge for me to feel like people can feel safe in the spaces that I create, and they can feel safe from judgment and criticism, especially when they're in a learning space, which we all are all the time. And so when someone feels that
That's
they're going
great.
to
Yeah.
coming to that learning space, and they're going to,
Yeah.
be talked down to or judged, or how could you do that, or why would you act like that? That's not a that's not conducive to learning or growth or opening up or feeling safe to be vulnerable about things, right?
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, that's a great place to kind of invite people to join us in the Whole Horse Apprenticeship this year, because I think that too is another obstacle that, when you look at some of the like alternative horsemanship stuff or different, they become camps, and it becomes very a dogmatic again, back to this kind of like rigid belief
Mm-hmm.
system. You have to do it this way. And if you're not, if you're not going barefoot, then you're killing your horse. Or if you're using a bit, so I think
Yeah.
people get scared off by that too,
Oh
because
yeah.
everybody's at a different place in their journey with horses. And if they feel like they're going to be told, they're doing it wrong, they're going to be judged, they're going to be rejected, why would they ever want to venture into this space?
Oh
So I
yeah.
think I'm so glad you said that, because I think it's been implicit, but it's good to hear, you putting that out there of like, this is a no judgment, safe space for people to explore, just check it
Yeah.
out, see what you think, try it. If it works for you,
Yeah.
great. If it doesn't, you don't have to do
Completely.
it.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I think that for many of us, we've grown up in this world where failure is like not good, or making a mistake
Yeah.
is like, I know for myself, like making mistakes still is so hard. I've
Oh
gotten
yeah,
better
me
at
too.
being gentle with myself around it, but like, man, it is
Yeah.
really programmed in me that like you do not make a mistake. If you're making a decision, it better be the right one, and that's it. And so
Yeah.
I think it's created in me this like part of me that just goes, I just want to be so gentle with anyone who's in that learning process, because it's so easy to be scared off, or
Yeah.
to feel like we're not good enough, or that we made a mistake, or I know it's one of my biggest things where I've been working with a friend of mine learning about really working well with Raven's hoof, because I trim my
Mhm.
own girls, and so I've been working with her to get really really attuned to the bone structure of that particular hoof, because it's irregular. And so I send pictures back and forth to her, and I notice the part of me that's like, I can't send a picture. What if she's going to tell me it's terrible? And
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I'll like delay, for like 2 or 3 days, and like, oh God. And it takes me like, I literally have to like cringe and send it. And I'm like, okay, like, let's work through this. This is why you have this particular individual in your life who's so, you know, like comes to it in such a good way that she can go, okay, this is what I'm seeing, but it doesn't feel judging, it doesn't feel critical. And so finding that community that can do the same thing and really embrace you. And now I'm like, okay, I'm safe to send pictures, and now my mare can get the assistance and the help that she needs as well, right? Because I'm not in this like, paralyzed ball, not able to
Right.
address this because I'm scared of the judgment, right? And yeah, and so I think if we can open up those types of learning spaces and build the bridge with all of those really wonderful skills, and build their resilience as well, so that when you're in the barn, kind of on feeling on your own, you still have the resilience and the strength to advocate for your horse, um, no matter what, right? And I think that's really important as well, to build those skills. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
and for it to not be, there's only one way to do it, because I think that's part of what I don't like about the horse world, is that
Yeah.
there's so many opinions. I was just telling you this when I was going through stuff with my horse's hoof and the abscess. Everybody has this like, you have to do it this way, and you must let them
Yep.
out walk on it. You must leave them in a stall and not let them, and it's so confusing, because you're just like, I don't know what is the right thing. People will argue to the death on like
Oh yeah.
really opposing views.
And
So
isn't it
I think to
interesting? Yeah, when you check in and
yeah.
go, what does Tenzin want? Right?
Right,
And he
right.
goes, he
Or
goes,
or
yeah, so this, and this would be great, right? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Or even, yeah, well, a whole nother podcast on how it can be challenging at times to be the advocate when it's not what your
Oh
horse
yeah.
wants, but it's for their own good. And I
Yeah,
think that's
totally.
a whole gray area to discuss some other time. But Yeah, just the feeling like, okay, you can use like I did some flower essences, I did some essential oils, I also did antibiotics from the vet,
Yep,
like,
totally,
so we did energy work. It was quite a combination of like a whole bunch of
totally.
different approaches mixed together. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing or one way only.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And it's often like I often say there's a big difference between what we want and what we need as well.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's very we talk about
Well,
that a lot more in the kinetic communication course, but yeah, there's a difference there for
oh,
sure.
great.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I'm super stoked as well. Like since we're on the topic of the apprenticeship, I just finalized with Elise Miki, and I am essentially going to be using her manual therapy for horse owners course, which is this like incredible
Awesome.
online program with anatomy and physiology. And she's a registered massage therapist for humans and an equine therapist as well. And one of my colleagues, so she's the one that I created the cranial equine cranial program with, and yeah, so I'm going to be adding that into apprenticeship, and I'm super stoked because it's been one of those things for years of like I want a skill set, people really wanting a skill set around body work and manual therapy for
Yeah.
their horses. So it's very exciting to have that landing as a part of all of this as well. So yeah, super stoked.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks great. I mean, people can go to the website where I'm sure you'll put the link up, but you have everything listed out that's included in the 6 months, and it's quite a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
it's jam packed. So I think it's
it's
gonna
it's
be
it's
very
kind of
exciting. But
yeah. It can be a little intense. There's like, there's a lot of info. It's my geeky brain that creates it. But yeah, it's really fun. And I have actually like spent the last 6 months sort of cutting things out and going, okay, what is totally and utterly relevant and important, and then just yeah, excited about my guests this year. I always have like guest experts on, so I have Susan Tenney coming on, who is just amazing. If you've heard her podcast, it's like awesome. And then
yeah,
Emily Keeson and Elise is going to be on to take us deeper into her course as well, and then one special guest as well. So yeah, and then I'm planning. I haven't done this before, but so generally I do like module intros. So I have 4 modules in the course, and so physical, energetic, emotional, spiritual, and on each one I do a webinar at the beginning to introduce the module and just what's going on in there and things. So this year I'm actually switching it up, and I'm actually going to do like little mini body talk sessions for each module with all of the horses and people that want to be included. And so
oh
it'll sort
wow,
of set us up in this really awesome way for the month and a half to come. I'm really excited because I hadn't done it before, but then after I did the Wednesday sessions, I just really loved that connection with people
yeah,
and doing that work and sort of setting things up for success. It just felt really cool. So yeah, so I've added that in, and so I'm stoked about that as well. It's gonna be it's gonna be fun. It's such a passion project. This particular program, I really, really adore it. Yeah, yeah. Aw.
is there a
Well,
cutoff date for when people can sign up?
yeah. So the apprenticeship starts September the 15th. I hear your puppy in the background, little
Yes,
cutie.
sorry, she's
Um.
behind like four
Oh, it's
closed
no,
doors and
it's
on a different level of the house, and
totally
it's still.
fine. Oh, Allie has this amazing puppy who's such a prince. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, so it starts September the 15th, and the cutoff is September the 15th for registration. But I am only taking
Okay.
25 people. I try to keep it a really small group.
Cool.
So yeah, and it's just like such a good group so far. I'm really stoked about that. And yeah, yeah. So, and then the website, just so you all have it, is www.alexalinton-apprenticeship-2020. So that's the landing page for that program if you're interested in looking at more details about it. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, I'm really looking forward to it, for one.
I'm so glad you're coming. That'll be
I know, me
awesome.
too.
You and Tenzin, and just to let everybody
Yes.
know, this program is very like dedicated to our horses. So we'll have like you might have like a bigger herd or like one horse in your world, but whatever it is that they'll be kind of riding with you or walking with you along this journey as well. I think it's super important to include the horses in this process. Obviously they're a big part of it, but if you don't have a horse, but you love horses and you're just interested in looking at this connection more deeply, you can also come as well. You don't have to have a horse in your life as such to join in.
I better tell Tenzin to get ready. That he's got
Yeah.
a big learning program coming up. We're going to be doing all kinds of interesting things.
He'll
Sure,
be like, "Oh
be
no, what
very
did she learn
excited.
today?" Yeah.
What is she doing now?
Completely.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Aw, well, thank you for being willing to come on again today, Allie. And it's
Yeah,
always such a
anytime.
pleasure. Yeah, it's always such a pleasure. And I always feel a little bit weird talking about myself and my stuff. Self promotion is like not a comfort zone for me. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate all of you out there who have listened in, and if you do want to know more about this program or anything that I have coming up, you can go to Alexa at alexalinton.com. You can email me there. And I will have quite a few things in upcoming. We're going to be eventually here, hopefully within the next couple of months, launching the equine cranial level 1 in the online space. So keep an eye out for that.
Ooh.
And and this apprenticeship starts September the 15th. So it would be amazing to see some of you there. I would love that. Thanks, Allie.
Thanks, Alexa.